I blew out the candles, and before the smoke even cleared, my daughter stood up, clinked a spoon against her glass, and said the one sentence that split my life into before and after. "You're too old to live here anymore." The room went quiet. Forks froze mid-air. Even the little sugar figurines on the cake looked shocked. I laughed because I thought it was a joke. Then she folded her arms, her jaw set, and I realized she wasn't kidding. And that's when the truth started peeling back, one humiliating layer at a time, until the night I found a stranger's suitcase in my hallway and a sold sign on the lawn I paid for. I should start by telling you, I'm not a fragile woman. I raised 2 children on a teacher's salary after their father passed, kept the lights on with coupons and stubbornness, and learned how to fix a leaking sink from a library book because plumbers are expensive and pride is priceless. This house, my husband and I signed for it at a folding table in a bank with dying plants, was never just wood and nails. It was rolled up jeans at the lake, sticky orange popsicles melting down little wrists, and a shoebox of birthday cards that smelled faintly like dust and spring. It was mine, the way a scar is yours. But that afternoon, the table was set with the good plates. My daughter, Melissa, picked them out of the hutch, clanking them louder than necessary, probably to remind me who had hands and who had arthritis. She'd brought a store-bought cake with candles shaped like numbers, 7 and 0. Everyone thinks 70 is a cliff. They forget it's also a ribbon that ties up a lot of stories. My son Daniel arrived late, rushing in with a bouquet like an apology, and my grandkids exploded around the dining room, sliding on socks like joyful bowling balls. I kept telling myself, this is what matters. Melissa kept glancing at the front door like she was expecting an important guest. Her husband Greg wasn't his usual smiling self. He sat there picking at a napkin, lips pressed so tight they could hold water. I asked how the new job was. He muttered, "Fine." The air was already crowded with things that weren't being said. When the cake came out, they sang, and I tried to ignore the way Melissa's voice wobbled. Greg lit the candles. He used the little clicker that always scares me, and I remembered the way my husband would cup his hand behind a match like he was shielding a newborn star. "Make a wish, Mom," Melissa said, and I did. I wished for something small, for everyone to just breathe, for the house to stay a house. I blew. The flame went out, and she cleared her throat. "We have to talk." That's how accountants announce audits and families announce disasters. "You're too old to live here anymore." She said it carefully, like she'd practiced in front of a mirror. Greg didn't look at me. Daniel's bouquet drooped. I wanted to be graceful. I wanted to be the kind of mother who smiles and says, "Let's discuss options." But what came out was an ugly little laugh, and something mean like, "Who told you that your doctor or your calculator?" I could feel my face heating up, embarrassment rising like a bad tide. The grandkids looked confused. I told them to go play in the den. They were too quiet as they left. That was my first warning. "It's not safe for you," Melissa said, softening her voice. "You fell last month and didn't tell anyone." She was right. My left hip remembers every stair I've ever climbed, but safety, in my daughter's mouth, felt like a synonym she was using to replace another word she didn't want to say out loud. Greg finally spoke. "There's black mold in the basement." He said it like he'd wrestled it himself. "And the roof is 30 years old." I wanted to tell him the roof and I were the same age. We creak, but we hold. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. He's always been the peacekeeper, the boy who apologized to a lamppost once for bumping into it. "Mom, maybe a condo would be easier. No stairs, closer to us." He looked at me the way grown children look at their parents when they're trying to parent them back. Love with a side of impatience. "Easier for who?" I asked. My voice didn't set crack. That surprised me, because it wouldn't be easier for me. The cake started to sweat. Little beads on the frosting like the house was crying for me. I got up slowly and felt 3 sets of eyes tracking every wobble like evidence. I went to the sink and ran water. Not because I needed it, but because I needed the sound. "I stem not moving," I said to the faucet. "You can't stay," Melissa said to my back. "We've already looked into some things." She said it like a confession and a threat. I turned. Into what things? Her shoulders slumped. "Mother, please. We found you 3 times last month with the stove on and nothing cooking." Greg added, "And the mail." "The mail is my business," I snapped. What I didn't tell them was that I had noticed envelopes disappearing before I could get to them. I'd chalked it up to memory. When you're 70, everyone blames memory. But this was something else. Footsteps on the porch, the thud of mail, and then later less of it. I kept thinking of the cable bill that somehow arrived already overdue, the bank letter that looked opened and smoothed down again. I tucked that worry in the pocket where mothers keep their suspicions. "We're doing this because we love you," Melissa said. And it almost worked. Those words have unlocked me for decades. But love is a pair of hands. I was looking at a shove. "Who is Seth?" I asked. "Us," she said, waving between herself and Greg. "And Daniel." She said my son's name like it would sit on my chest and calm me. He winced. "I never said she had to move," Daniel murmured. "Just that we should talk. Maybe get some help in." "Help costs money," Greg said, a little too fast. He immediately looked sorry. There it was, the smell behind the perfume. "Is that what this is?" I asked. "The house is worth a decent amount these days." Melissa says I'm too old and Greg says help costs money, and suddenly I smell a real estate sign. My hands were shaking. I held them under the tap, let the water hide the tremor. Melissa Sepp's eyes filled. "It's steps not like that." She blinked hard. "But if you sold now, you could get a beautiful place with an elevator, and neighbors and a nurse on site, and you wouldn't set be alone." She swallowed. "You wouldn't set be a burden." Ah, the magic word. The word that makes old women fold themselves smaller, makes us apologize for existing. I felt something inside me stand up, not my spine. Something older than bones. "I carried you through the flu when you were 5. I said, "I paid for your braces by eating oatmeal and canned peaches for 6 months. I taught you to drive in the high school parking lot and cried every time you made it home safe. I have been many things, but I have never been a burden." No one spoke. The refrigerator hummed. A car rolled by outside. The scent of frosting and strawberries turned heavy, like it was crowding the room. Greg cleared his throat. "We already spoke to a realtor." My head snapped to him so fast I felt the pinch later. "You what?" "Just to get a sense of the market," Melissa said quickly. "Nothing serious yet." Her voice hovered on that word, yet like a bird uncertain of landing. "Mom, please don't make this harder." "Harder." She said it like I was doing the pushing. I excused myself. "That's what you do when your dignity starts leaking." I went upstairs to wash my face as if cold water can wash off betrayal. On the landing I paused. There, against the wallpaper patterned with tiny pansies my mother loved, were the framed photos of my children. There was Melissa at 6, hair a wild halo, missing 2 teeth, grin reckless with joy. I touched the glass. "Where did you go?" I whispered, and hated myself for the question. In the bathroom, I looked at the woman in the mirror. She looked back with tired eyes that still had a spark. I brushed my hair like my mother taught me, 100 strokes. I made it to 12 before my hands slowed. I opened the medicine cabinet for no reason and found the little brass key I keep behind the aspirin. Habit. The key fits the small box under my bed. Inside that box is the letter my husband wrote before the surgery. He didn't wake up from, the one where he called me Rosie and told me the house would always be my safe place. The one where he said, "Please don't let anyone hustle you." I pressed my fingers against the cool metal. I didn't open the box. Not yet. But the key warmed in my palm. When I came back down, the kids were coloring in the den, tongues sticking out in concentration, tiny crayons squeaking. Daniel was kneeling beside them, talking softly. He looked up. You okay, Mom? Never better, I said, the way I say fine at the doctor's when I'm bleeding. Melissa and Greg were whispering in the dining room. Voices low, urgent. When I stepped in, they straightened like teenagers caught sneaking in past curfew. My chair at the table felt less like a seat and more like a witness stand. What realtor? I asked. Melissa hesitated. Her name is Stacy. She's efficient. The way she said it made my teeth itch. Efficient is for vacuums and assassins. Has she been here? I asked. Greg shot Melissa a look. She swallowed. Once just to see. I felt the room tilt a degree. The idea that someone had walked through my bedroom, glanced at my husband's dresser, measured the width of my living room like it was a dress they were altering, that stung without telling me. We didn't want to upset you, Greg said. Newsflash, I said, and the sarcasm settled in my mouth like pennies. I said I'm upset. We stared at each other over a crooked cake. That's the thing about family showdowns. They never happen over an empty table. There's always a chicken bone or a candle to bear witness. I took a breath. I'm not selling, I said. You can buy whatever brochures you like. I'm not selling. I'll get a railing for the stairs. I'll get a nurse to come 3 times a week. I'll use the alarm stickers even though we all know they're bluff. I felt my voice steady. This is my home. Melissa Seff's face closed. That sip's the only way to describe it, as if it had windows and they shut. She nodded slowly, like she had expected me to say that and had already packed away the empathy. Okay, she said, standing. If that sip's how you want it. Greg pushed back his chair. We tried, he said to no one, which is another way of saying I'm done trying. Daniel hovered by the doorway, torn, his gaze ping-ponging between us. He gave me a look that said, call me later. I filed it away with other things I planned to forget on purpose. They left sooner than I thought they would, the grandkids trailing with their drawings clutched to their chests. On the way out, I heard Melissa say to Greg, we'll do it this week, and I felt cold rise up from the soles of my feet to the crown of my head. The front door clicked. The house exhaled, and the silence was enormous. I cleaned. That's my ritual after pain. The sponge knows how to absorb what I can't. I stacked plates and ran water and tried to scrub the word burden out of the grout. I found a small frosting smear on the edge of the table, the kind you'd miss if you weren't the one who wiped this wood for 40 years, and I left it there on purpose. A tiny rebellious flag. When my hands couldn't keep busy anymore, I sat, and the chair creaked like an old friend stretching. I slept badly. In the small hours, I thought I heard someone on the porch. The cat, Biscuit, lifted his head but didn't move. I wrote a note to myself on the pad by the lamp, call locksmith. The pen left an angry blot where I pressed too hard. Morning arrived with a bitter coffee smile. I put on my walking shoes to fetch the newspaper. A ritual older than Melissa's patience, and the first thing I noticed was that the mailbox was empty. Not unusual. It was early. The second thing I noticed was that the little metal flag was down even though I hadn't touched it. The third thing I noticed was the footmark on the flowerbed soil near the front steps, a crisp oval from a shoe I didn't own. I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Stacy, I whispered. Because sometimes you just know. Around 10, there was a knock. I opened the door to a woman with perfect teeth and a blazer the color of expensive toothpaste. She smelled like grapefruit and ambition. Rosie, she chirped, like we were old friends. People who call you nicknames without permission rarely ask for it later. It's Seps Rose, I said. Of course, she said, not writing it down. I'm Stacy. We met briefly last week when Melissa and Greg were here. She said it like a question and confirmation all at once, and I thought, no, you met my hallway. You met my air. She held a clipboard like a shield. Mind if I come in? I do, I said, and smiled. But come in anyway. If you're going to complain about the roof, you might as well do it from under it. The clipboard bobbed. "You're funny," she said, and stepped inside. Her eyes did the sweep. Staircase, living room, the framed photos, the scuffed baseboard. Charming. Lots of character. That's realtor for old and possibly haunted. "Coffee?" I asked. "Because my mother raised me to be polite to wolves, too." She declined. "I'll be quick," she said, setting her clipboard on the table with proprietorial ease that made the brass key in my pocket hum. "Melissa and Greg asked me to prepare a listing packet so we can get top dollar. The market is softening, and we should strike while demand is still. This house isn't set for sale," I said. She blinked. "Oh, they said you had agreed." They were wrong. I folded my arms, mirroring the stance my daughter had taken at my birthday dinner without meaning to. "And they don't set own this house." "I do." Stacy Sepp's smile stayed pasted on, but the edges frayed. "Well, yes, technically," she said, which is a word people use when they are about to pretend that facts are preferences. "But they mentioned your health." "My health is my business," I said. "My house is my business. The only thing that's your business is your shoes on my rug." I surprised us both. She picked up her clipboard. "If you change your mind, call me." She laid a glossy folder on the table. On the cover was a photo of a house with a bow on it, like property was a present. I didn't touch it. She left, and her perfume took a while to go. As soon as the door clicked, I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mom. I need you to come over," I said. "Now." "Lunch," I said. "I make tuna salad." He arrived with a bag of chips, and the face he wears when he thinks someone is about to cry. I too proud to cry with an audience, so I set plates and told him a story instead. He listened, jaw tight. "I didn't know they called her over," he said. "I swear I didn't set." "I believe you," I said, and I did. My son Sepp's truths are simple things, but they are moving fast. He leaned back. "Greg Sepp's in trouble," he said finally. The words falling like nails. "He made a bad investment, and Melissa feels backed into a corner." I closed my eyes for a second. The shape behind the perfume. How bad. "Bad enough that they said, 'Looking for exits,'" he said. "Your home looked like a door." I thought about my daughter at 6, the gap in her teeth, the way she used to crawl into my bed during storms and tuck her feet under my knees, because she said, "That's where the warmth lives." I thought about the woman at my table saying, "I'm a burden and a realtor on my rug." I thought about the key in my pocket and the box it belongs to. I got up without a word and went upstairs, Daniel's confusion following me like a shadow. I pulled out the box from under the bed, the one with a little ribbon around it because my husband had a sense of ceremony. The letter was there, and with it, something else. A folded paper I'd never bothered to unfold. We had signed it years ago when we refinanced, jargon that made my eyes cross. I unfolded it now and read slowly, my finger tracing the lines the way a child learns. When I finished, my mouth went dry. Downstairs, I handed the paper to my son. "Read it," I said. He did. Then he looked at me, eyes wide. "Mom, they can sell this house." He tapped the middle of the page. "You have a life estate." The words sat in the room like a candle someone had just lit. It didn't fix my hip. It didn't erase the word burden, but it changed the map. It meant that as long as I breathed, this house was mine in a way no realtor could hustle me out of. I sat down, suddenly tired and suddenly awake. "Good," I said. "Now let's see what they'll do when they realize that." Daniel folded the paper carefully like it was something alive and set it in the middle of the table. The house felt different with that single sheet on the wood, as if the walls had stepped closer and put their hands on my shoulders. I didn't cry. Relief doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like the way you stand up a little straighter without meaning to. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "Nothing dramatic," I said, because I've learned that calm scares people more than shouting. "But I am going to close the doors that someone opened without asking." I slid the paper back into the box, the key warm in my palm like a promise, and tucked the box where it belonged, out of sight but not out of mind. We ate the tuna salad. The chips crunched like punctuation. Daniel told me about his day, and I let him because life has to keep its rhythms even when someone tries to change the station on you. After lunch, he offered to fix the loose banister. I watched him work with a screwdriver and patience, and the steady twist of his wrist soothed me. "I'll be back this weekend," he said, standing, "and I'll install that railing on the stairs." "Bring your drill," I said, "and your good mood." When he left, I called the locksmith. He came by in a van with a cartoon key painted on the side, boots that tracked in rain, and the easy confidence of someone who knows how to make stubborn things cooperate. He changed the front door lock, then the back, then looked at me with a question in his eyebrows. "The mailbox too," I said. "You bet," he said, and when he handed me the new little silver key, I liked the weight of it. He suggested a camera for the porch. I told him those things make me feel watched. He said, "That's the point." I said, "By me, not by strangers," and he grinned and gave me a sticker that said the house was protected anyway. Bluff accepted. Late afternoon slid into the house like honey. I made tea and opened the folder. Stacy had left, the one I'd ignored out of principle. Inside were photos of my rooms taken without me in them, my couch without my dent, my kitchen without my cat, my bedroom fluffed like a hotel I couldn't afford. Prices, bullet points, phrases like great bones and up-and-coming neighborhood, as if a place could run on hope and fresh paint. I closed it. I've never liked being appraised. At 5, the phone rang. Melissa. I considered letting it go to the old answering machine out of pure pettiness, the way you don't sit wave at a driver who didn't use their blinker. But I picked up. She jumped right in. "Stacy said she stopped by and you were rude." I pictured the grapefruit perfume. I was honest. "She was in my house without my permission last week. I consider that rude." Silence burned on the line for a second. "We sat trying to help you. Stop using that word to excuse trespassing." My voice didn't set rise. It didn't set need to. "Come over tomorrow. You, not Greg? Noon. We still talk." She breathed out. "Fine. Then smaller, love you." "I love you," I said, and meant it like a truth with splinters in it. That night, I slept with the window cracked and the new locks clicked. The air was cool, and the crickets sang their stubborn song. I dreamed of my husband at a kitchen table, smiling and tapping a folded paper with one finger like a drummer keeping time. When I woke, the feeling lingered, not happiness. Exactly, but alignment. Like I had tilted back into a groove that was mine. Morning. Coffee. Crossword. The small, faithful things. I washed the good plates, might as well since they'd seen more drama than Thanksgiving, and set out 2 mugs. Biscuit sprawled in a sunbeam. Queen of all she surveyed. When Melissa knocked, I answered quickly so she wouldn't stand on the porch long enough to remember where the spare key used to be. She came in with a face that wanted to be composed and a mouth that wanted to argue. She looked around like the house had shifted overnight. "You changed the locks," she said. "I changed the locks," I said, "and the mailbox. Have a seat." She did, carefully, like the chair might bite. She wore the scarf I bought her last Christmas and didn't remark on it. I poured tea and slid a plate of butter cookies over like we were about to negotiate a treaty with sugar. She didn't touch them. "I know you set or angry," she said, "but you scared us last month. The fall, the stove, the stairs." I held up a hand. "We can talk about grab bars and railings and a little help. We can talk about a weekly clean if seeing my dust bunnies gives you hives. But we stir not talking about selling." She pressed her lips together. "Mom, I have a life estate," I said. "Do you know what that is?" Her eyes flickered. "She seps quick, my daughter. Always has been. It means you can live here as long as you want." "As long as I sit alive," I said. which is longer than some people plan for. I took a sip. The tea was perfect. We signed it when we refinanced, years ago. Your father insisted. He knew I'd be stubborn, but he also knew the world can be pushy. He wanted a lock that wasn't sit on a door. She looked at her hands, then at me. A blush rose on her cheeks that made her look young and briefly guilty. I didn't know, she said. You didn't ask, I said. I didn't say. You didn't trust me. I didn't say. You went behind my back. I didn't say. The girl with the missing teeth would have asked to see my pockets before accusing me of hiding candy. She softened, and it made me want to reach for her and push her away at the same time. Greg said the market that we could get you somewhere safe and have money left over to. She stopped, and there it was. The last word she didn't want to say. To what? I asked. Patch a hole you didn't set make. Fix a mistake you didn't set realize you co-signed? Keep your kids in dance class? Keep your house? Tell the truth, Melissa. Even if it sets a messy one. She swallowed. Greg invested in something. A friend's thing. It went south. Her voice wobbled. We're behind, and I hate asking you for anything. She looked at me with those same storm night eyes from childhood, except this storm was one she'd walked into herself. I just thought selling would solve everything at once. Selling my life to pay for your lesson, I said, not unkindly. That sip's a very fast solution. Fast solutions tend to be expensive. Her shoulders slumped. I know. I let the silence sit with us, parceled out sips of tea to fill it. When I spoke, I heard my mother in my voice, firm and not quite gentle. Here is what's going to happen. I'm going to make this house safer for me because I want to, not because you cornered me. Daniel's coming to install a railing. I'm getting a nurse twice a week, morning check, pill organizer, that sort of thing. I'll give you a key. I can revoke, not the kind we hide under a frog statue. She blinked, nodding too quickly. Okay. And you, I said, are going to get your financial house in order, not by gutting mine, by being an adult. Talk to the bank. Talk to a credit counselor. Sell the boat you don't use. Cancel the subscription boxes. Bake cookies instead of buying them with a monthly fee. She huffed a tiny laugh that became a cough. We don't have a boat. You have something that sips shaped like a boat, I said. Find it. If you need a bridge loan for a month or two while you shuffle things, I can help. With a contract. With dates. With numbers both of us understand, not the kind that only live in Greg Sip's head and his friend Sip's mouth. There. I wasn't punishing. I wasn't rescuing. I was building a small fence and opening a gate on hinges that squeaked so everyone would hear them move. She stared at me. The way my students used to stare when a metaphor in a poem finally clicked. You sipped help? I will not fund irresponsibility, I said, but I will invest in my grandchildren not moving mid-school year. I will invest in my daughter not drowning. There sips a difference. A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it hard, angry at its existence. I'm sorry, she said. The words cracking like ice in a glass. I was scared. I still am. I know, I said. Me too. I reached across and took her hand. It felt like reaching across a river to find a rock that would hold both our weight. But don't ever make me the problem to solve your problem again. I once said, she whispered. I'm going to hold you to that, I said, and squeezed her fingers. And I'm going to meet with a lawyer this week to make sure this life estate paper has a twin in a safe place and a cousin that snarls if someone tries to play games. She let out a breath that had been weighing on her ribs. Okay. We ate a cookie each. Biscuit meowed at us like an opinionated ant. Melissa finally looked around the room and saw it the way I needed her to, not as inventory but as a map of us, nicks in the table, the plant that always leans toward the sun, the couch that knows the exact shape of my nap. She smiled. Small, but real. You're not too old, she said. Say it louder, I said. Because sometimes you have to make a truth bounce off walls to lodge properly. You're not too old, she repeated. A little laugh tucked into the words. You're tough. I said practiced, I said. There's seps a difference. She left with a hug that felt like something uncoiling. After the door shut, I held the edge of the table and waited for the adrenaline to leak out of my elbows. Then I called Daniel and told him what I'd said. He whistled low. Mom, he said, awe tinting the word, remind me never to play poker with you. I don't set bluff, I said. I just don't set show every card at once. The next few days were busy with practicalities. The nurse came. Her name was Alana. She wore blue scrubs and sneakers and smelled like lavender hand soap. She went through my medications, labeled the morning and evening ones with a label maker that clicked like tiny footsteps. You're in good shape, she said, and I tucked the sentence in my pocket like a lucky coin. Daniel installed the railing and made me promise to hold it even when I was feeling spry. I agreed, which means I sometimes do and sometimes don't. I am not a liar, but I am still me. I called a lawyer, recommended by a woman at church, who knows how to sharpen a pencil and a boundary. The office smelled like paper and quiet. The lawyer, a man with silver hair and reading glasses he wore on purpose, read my life estate document and nodded. It's solid, he said. He suggested adding a letter to the deed at the county office for clarity and creating a trust for when the inevitable eventually arrives. The way he said inevitable made me like him. He didn't say it with doom. He said it with competence. While we sibber at it, I said, how do I make sure no one signs something for me that I don't want signed? We set up a power of attorney with teeth and a medical directive that sounded like my voice when I am tired and still certain. He gave me copies. I tucked one in the brass key box, one in my kitchen drawer under the spatulas, and one in a folder I labeled important things people like to forget. On Thursday, while I was labeling the pantry shelves for no one but me, beans beside beans, soups as a crowd, there was a knock. I opened to find Stacy again, blazer a new shade of aspirational. She wore a smile that made me think of knives in the dishwasher pointing up. I heard you have some questions, she said, as if I'd called her. I don't set, but I have a statement. She glanced down the walkway like she was waiting for backup. Can I come in? No, I said pleasantly. We can do this on the porch. The weather sip's too nice to invite nonsense indoors. She adjusted her clipboard like a nervous tick. Melissa and Greg asked me. What they ask doesn't matter, I said. Not unkindly, because they don't own this house. I do, and I have a life estate. Do you know what that is? A flicker, then the quick recalculation behind her eyes. I do, she said. Rude, I said. Then you know I won't be signing anything that puts me anywhere but right here. If you receive any documents with my name on them, you will call this number before doing anything at all. I handed her my lawyer's card. She took it like it might stain. Of course, she said. Voice buttered. We only ever act at our clients' direction. Your clients, I said, are confused about who sips directing what. Consider yourself unconfused. I smiled the smile my students used to call the principal smile. And please stop taking pictures through my window. Color climbed her neck. We would never. You would, I said. But now you won. Have a nice day. She hesitated, took a breath like she wanted to argue, then thought better of it. If you change your mind, I'll knit you a scarf, I said, and closed the door softly, because slamming is for people who don't control the hinge. That evening, Melissa called. Stacy says you were firm. I could hear the cautious amusement hiding behind the word, like a child peeking around a curtain. I was clear, I said. Did you talk to the bank? She did. She sounded tired. Real tired. The kind that isn't solved by a nap. We are going to sell the second car, she said. And the storage unit. Why were we paying to store things we don't set to use? It sets an expensive closet. Because life gets busy, and people like to pay to postpone decisions, I said. Decide. She whispered, we are. Over the next week, something shifted that you almost wouldn't notice if you weren't listening for it. The tone of Melissa's texts softened, the frequency of her visits increased without an agenda tucked under her arm, and the conversations started to sound less like negotiations and more like what they were supposed to be. Check-ins, jokes, the small currency of a family that remembers how to be one. Greg even came by with the kids one Saturday. He stood on my porch like a guilty dog who knows he chewed the good slipper. I'm sorry, he said, big and plain. I set not your solution, I said. But I set not your enemy. He nodded, eyes shiny, and then crouched on the rug and played blocks with his son like a man who'd remembered what actually steadies a house. Of course. Peace never comes without a test. The test arrived as a letter with a government seal on it, the kind that makes your stomach flip even if you've done nothing wrong. I opened it at the counter, the knife slicing cleanly. It was a notice about delinquent property taxes, except the amounts were wrong, the dates didn't match, and the envelope looked like it had taken a bath and then been ironed. It smelled like the same hands that had been helping with my mail. I set it down, took a photo, and called the number on the county website, not the one on the letter. Scam, the clerk said, bored and kind at once. We're seeing a lot of those. I hung up and stared at the paper. The old fear rose, the one that tells you you're a mark now, that every phone call is a hook. I let it flood me for a minute, and then deliberately let it drain. I put the letter in a clear plastic sleeve like it was a specimen and wrote on it with a marker. No, every time you label a fear, it gets smaller. Ask any teacher who has ever named the class Tarantula. On Sunday, the pastor preached about honoring father and mother. He didn't wag a finger. He told a story about his own stubborn dad and a lawnmower nobody was allowed to touch. People laughed. I opened my eyes during the closing prayer and saw Melissa across the aisle, her head bowed, her mouth moving with words I couldn't hear. I didn't need to. We were praying the same thing. Let's not mess this new startup. In the days that followed, the routines held. The nurse came. We talked about recipes and blood pressure. Daniel checked the smoke detectors and teased me when I stood on the second stair to reach the top shelf. I baked muffins and sent a dozen home with Melissa because feeding is one of the few control levers life can't pry out of my fingers. I called the county and confirmed my property taxes schedule, then set reminders on my phone with names that made me laugh. Pay the people so they don't take the land. It's important to find humor's faucet and turn it on. One afternoon, I walked past the front window and froze. A car had idled at the curb for too long, the way you can feel when someone's eyes stay on you a beat past polite. I clocked the make, the dent on the bumper, the air freshener swinging like a pendulum. A man got out in a shirt with a company logo I didn't recognize and took a few steps toward the house, holding a clipboard. People with clipboards have been the villains and heroes of my month. He squinted at the number by my door. I opened the window, the screen between us a little fence. Can I help you? I asked, voice bright enough to be neighborly and loud enough to be useful. Miss Rose? He asked. I have a delivery. What kind? A moving kit, he said. Boxes. Tape. From Motor. He checked the clipboard. From Stacy. Of course. When polite doors close, some people try the window. I smiled so hard I could have cracked glass. Leave them on the curb, I said. The trash man comes Thursday. He shifted, unsure whether to laugh. You heard me, I said, and shut the window. I called Melissa. Tell your agent to stop spending her marketing budget on my patients, I said. She won't bother you again, Melissa said, and from the steel in her tone, I believed her. Progress isn't always visible. Sometimes it's a single sentence said correctly. A week later, I hosted dinner. Not a birthday. No candles shaped like numbers. Just stew and salad and biscuits that Biscuit tried to steal. Melissa arrived early and set the table the way I like, fork on the left, not because of etiquette, but because my wrists turn that way easier. Daniel brought flowers that looked like fireworks. Greg came in with a bottle of sparkling cider and a look on his face like a person who stopped falling. We ate. We talked about school projects and bad reality TV and a neighbor's garden that had decided to produce 26 zucchini like a dare. No one said the words sell, burden, or safe. No one even hinted at them. It felt ordinary. And ordinary after a storm feels like luxury. After dessert, Melissa pulled a folded paper from her bag. My heartbeat ratcheted up out of muscle memory. She saw my face and held up a palm. "It steps not what you think." She handed it to me. It was a budget. Their budget. Simple, honest, rows and numbers that made sense, not fantasies dressed as spreadsheets. At the bottom, a small line item, repay mom, bridge, with dates, with amounts, with a space for my signature that wasn't coercion, just respect. "I'm proud of you," I said. She exhaled like a tire finding the right pressure again. We signed, we hugged, and even Greg looked lighter. You can't spend dignity like money, but people can feel when you have it in the room. Later, when the kids were asleep on my couch in a tangle of blankets and jam, Melissa and I washed dishes side by side. She bumped my shoulder with hers. "What did you wish for when you blew out the candles?" she asked, suddenly shy. I could have told her the small wish I made. I could have made a joke. Instead, I told the truth that had arrived late, but on time. "I wished that this house would stay a house," I said. "Not a bargaining chip. Not a fight. A place where we can be a family." She nodded, eyes shining. "Me too," she said. Even if it wasn't true then, maybe it was true now. Sometimes the wish changes after you make it. That's allowed. After they left, I walked through the rooms in my socks, the way I do when the quiet is good. I straightened the throw blanket, picked up a Lego before it could assassinate a foot, and turned off the lamp by the armchair. At the foot of the stairs, I held the new railing and smiled, not because I needed it in that exact moment, but because it was there if I did. That's what safety is supposed to feel like, available, not imposed. In my bedroom, I pulled the box from under the bed one more time, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I ran my fingers over the envelope's edge and unfolded my husband's letter. "Rosie," it began. The way only he ever wrote it. I read it all the way through, even though I know each sentence by heart. At the end, I added my own line out loud into the empty room. "I didn't let anyone hustle me," I said. "Not even our kid." I slipped the life estate copy beside it and closed the lid. I put the key back behind the aspirin where it lives like a quiet watchman. I turned off the light and the house settled. Houses make noises when they're relieved, a soft pop in the baseboard, a sigh in the vent. Or maybe that was me. In the morning, I stood on the porch and watched the street wake up. The newspaper landed with a friendly thud. The new mailbox key clicked smooth and sure. The air had the edge of a season about to turn. "Across the street, Mr. Alvarez waved from his steps. He's 83 and still makes tamales that could negotiate a ceasefire. I waved back and thought about bringing him cookies and telling him the story, and then I decided not to. Not yet. Not because I was ashamed, because some victories are sweeter when you let them sit in the pan and cool. The phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. "Mom, can I swing by after work to show you the new budget draft? Also, I found a place that installs grab bars and they don't make your bathroom look like a hospital. Come by," I typed. Then added, "I shall make chicken, and yes to the bars. If they are the pretty kind." A thumbs up bubble, then a heart. It's funny how small pixels can hold big apologies. I went back inside. Biscuit demanded breakfast with the entitlement of royalty, and I obliged. The kettle sang. I took down the good mug because every day is at least a little special if you decide it is. As I poured, I realized my wish had come true in a way I hadn't expected. The house had stayed a house, not because the walls were strong or the papers were signed, though both mattered. It stayed a house because the people in it remembered what it was for. I blew on the surface of the tea and took a careful sip. It was perfect, the way practice makes things perfect without them ever being flawless. I stood in the quiet and listened to the thing you only hear if you've lived in a place long enough to know its heartbeat. The subtle, steady hum of a life that refused to be boxed up and carried out to the curb. 2 days later, the morning started like any other coffee. The nurse's neat check marks on her clipboard. A short walk to wave at Mr. Alvarez and his flourishing tomatoes. On the way back, I noticed something small and sharp. A strip of tape stuck to the sidewalk, the buff kind movers use, clinging to a footprint like it had survived a scuffle. It was out of place the way a tuxedo is at a picnic. I frowned and kept walking. Suspicion is a muscle. Mine had gotten stronger. Inside, I set my keys in the dish by the door and stopped. There, in the narrow hallway where the kids hang their backpacks when they come over, sat a suitcase, not one of mine. New hard-sided, a red tag flapping like a tongue. My heart slammed once, hard, then positioned itself where it belonged. I called out, "Hello?" The word felt ridiculous and necessary. There was movement from the kitchen. A woman stepped out, mid-40s, tidy ponytail, nervous smile that tried to cover a layer of defensiveness. "Hi, you must be Rose," she said. "I Sep'm Karen, from Carenest." I looked at her. I looked at the suitcase. I looked at my life. "From what?" "Carenest," she repeated, brightening like the repetition might make it real. "Live in elder care. Your daughter hired me. I'm early, I know, but traffic was light, so lucky me. I've already put the chicken in the fridge. Someone delivered groceries, and I'll do a quick sweep of the upstairs and—" "You shall do nothing upstairs," I said, not raising my voice and still stopping her like a hand to the chest. "Because this is my home, and because no one told me you were coming." Her smile quivered. It was supposed to be a surprise, the good kind. I've learned there are 2 kinds of surprises at my age: cakes and ambushes. "Well," I said, "I prefer my caregivers like I prefer my shoes, chosen by me, and comfortable." She flushed. "I completely understand. Melissa said you might be hesitant at first, and that sip's totally normal. My references are excellent." "I'm sure you were competent," I said, softening the edge by a degree because this wasn't her fault. "But I am not an appointment. I am a person. Did you sign anything?" She reached into her tote and pulled out a thick envelope with glossy branding and a contract clipped on top. The top page had my name in bold, printed neat as a label on a jar I hadn't filled. Underneath it, a signature that looked like mine if you asked a child to trace it after spinning them in a circle. Heat rose up my neck. I took a photo, then another with the pen tucked along the line, proof for people who like to argue. "That sip's not my signature," I said. Her eyes widened. "Oh, you didn't know," I said. "But now you do. Please take your suitcase back to your car and call your office. Tell them the client says no. Then tell them to put a red flag on any account with my name and my address, and the word Secca Surprise S attached to it." She nodded, already folding in on herself. "I so sorry. I don't want trouble." "Neither do I said. "That's why we are going to stop it at the doorway." She rolled the suitcase out, wheels whispering like they were ashamed. When the door closed, I stood there and let the adrenaline ping around my ribs until it wore itself out. Then I called Melissa. She answered breathless. "Is she there? Do you like her?" "Karen sips the best." "She sep's gone," I said. "And you are going to come over right now, without Greg, with your listening ears." She arrived in 10 minutes, hair in a hasty knot, apology already crowding her face. "You forged my signature," I said. Her mouth fell open. Shame hit her so fast. It looked like dizziness. "No, I signed for you, which I know is wrong. I know, but they said to get the ball rolling." Say the word, I said. She swallowed. Forged. I let the silence do the work. She twisted her hands, then let them go because twisting doesn't fix anything. I thought I was helping. After we talked, I understood about the house. I do, but I still worried. I didn't want you alone at night. Karen could have kept me safe, I finished, while reinforcing the idea that you get to make my choices for me. Listen to me carefully. If you think I need a live-in caregiver, you bring me brochures. You bring me coffee. You bring me your worry like a gift you're not sure I want. You do not bring me a stranger with a suitcase. She nodded, eyes glassy. Sorry. I know, I said. And I sit and tired of hearing it, and also not tired at all, because it means you know you did wrong. Call CareNest. Tell them they sip not to accept a contract unless my voice is on the line. Then call your husband and tell him the same. She did, right there at my table, both calls back to back, voice firm, no wobble. When she hung up, she exhaled. Okay, I said. Now help me move the chair by the window. I've decided to change the living room. People think control is big. Sometimes it's where the sunlight hits at 4 in the afternoon. We were still sliding the rug when Daniel knocked and let himself in. Everything all right? He asked. Eyes taking in the shifted furniture, the flushed cheeks, the way Melissa avoided the glossy CareNest folder, now quarantined under the potted fern. I told him. He put his hands on his hips and blew out a breath. All right, he said to his sister. No more surprises. For anyone. She nodded, a little girl for a moment, then not. No more. That evening I made soup. The methodical slicing calmed me. I added noodles at the end the way my mother taught me, and the house filled with a smell that could make anyone reconsider their worst ideas. I ate a bowl in the quiet, then another because comfort doesn't count calories. I slept, and the night was uneventful until a sound woke me, metal against metal, a clink that didn't belong to the old house's size. I slipped on slippers and held the railing like I promised Daniel. At the front window, I peeked through the curtain. My porch light poured a cone onto the lawn. In that cone, a man held a post driver, another held a sign. The word sold glared at me in red like a slap. I didn't think. I acted. I turned on the porch light to high. I opened the door, stepped into the frame so the alarm sticker could do its silent bluff beside my head, and said, "Take that back to your car, or I'll call the police and my lawyer." In that order. The man with the post driver froze. The other, young enough to still have acne under his beard, blinked. Must stem. We were told. By whom? I asked, low and sharp. He faltered. The agent, said she had approval. Does my name end in agent? I asked. No? Then you don't have approval. I held up my phone and took a photo. The sign, the men, the truck with a magnetic logo that would be very helpful for a strongly worded message. You plant that in my grass, and you'll be pulling it out under the supervision of a uniform. They looked at each other. The older one shrugged. Already defeated. "Kasepman," he muttered to the kid. "It's Sep's not worth the hassle." They loaded the sign back with a clatter that satisfied something primal. The truck pulled away, tail lights shrinking, and the night took a breath. I shut the door and leaned against it, laughing once. One short, incredulous bark, because sometimes the audacity is so crisp you have to admire its stupidity. I texted the photo to Melissa and Daniel and my lawyer with a caption that read, "No more surprises, pass it on." My lawyer replied at 6:12 a.m. On it. He sees someone at the real estate board, and 3 hours later, Stacy called. Her voice was 2 steps lower than usual. "Rose," she said. "The sunshine gone. The clouds real. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I think you tried to plant a lie in my lawn," I said. "That was a misunderstanding." "No," I said. "This is me misunderstanding you as a professional. It won't happen again. You are not to call my children about my house. You will not list it, show it, photograph it, or name it without my legal consent. If you do, I will spend the rest of my lively years making sure every review site knows you tried to sell a house that wasn't for sale, and I will file complaints so tidy they'll teach them in trainings." Silence. Then the barest scrape of respect. "Understood," she said. "Good," I said and hung up. Clean as snipping a thread. News travels. Mr. Alvarez waved me over that afternoon, with a plate covered in foil and an eyebrow that asked a question. I didn't said answer. "Eat," he said. "You look like you wrestled a signpost." "I did," I said. And a laugh surprised us both. The next day brought paperwork, the responsible kind. The lawyer filed notice with the county that my life estate included explicit prohibition on listing without my consent. He called it belt and suspenders. I called it an outfit I could dance in. Melissa sent a screenshot of her email to Stacy terminating the relationship, effective immediately and retroactively, if that were possible. She signed it with her full name like a person who knows who she is again. There were no more suitcases. No more men with post drivers. The quiet returned and stayed. Not sulking, not tense, just present. I took to a new ritual. At dusk, I'd sit on the porch with lemonade and count the porch lights flicking on up and down the street. It's hard to feel alone when electricity choreographs a neighborhood's heartbeat. One evening, while the sky bruised purple at the edges, Melissa sat beside me. We watched a boy wobble past on a too-big bike, determination carrying his knees like a promise. "I think I know why I pushed so hard," she said finally. "Because you were scared," I said. "Yes," she said. "And because I thought if I could control you, I could control everything, like I could make life smooth by making you smaller." I turned that over. It fit. "It doesn't work that way," I said. "I know," she said. I sipped, like to try something different. "What?" "Letting you tell me what you need before I tell you what you need." "Revolutionary," I said, and we both laughed. The soft kind that makes your ribs generous. She took a breath. "I told Greg if he ever talks about your house again like it accepts a solution to his problem, he can find another problem to be married to." He cried. "Good," I said. "Tears clean floors." She nudged me with her shoulder. "Can we do your birthday again? Properly? No announcements. Just cake and us." "We can," I said. "But no number candles. They melt under pressure." She grinned. "Deal." We picked a Saturday. The kids made decorations out of construction paper. Daniel brought a playlist that was mostly songs from when I was 30, which made me feel 30 in the joints that count. Melissa baked a cake by herself. No store-bought guilt sagging under its icing. She set it down with a ceremony that understood what we were fixing. "Make a wish," she said, and I did. Even though I already had what I wanted. I wished that we would keep choosing each other, even when that choice was heavy and dull, and not the stuff of glossy brochures. I wished that when we forgot, the house would remind us by being stubborn on our behalf. I blew out the candles. The smoke curled, then cleared, and instead of a speech, Melissa handed me an envelope, the thin kind that usually means bills, but this one felt light. Inside was a photo, printed from a phone. My front lawn, green and a little messy, without a sign, under a sky so blue it could have been bragging. Underneath, in her handwriting, it said, "Your home, our family. No for sale." I pressed it to my chest like a second sternum. "Put that on the fridge," I said. At adult eye level. After dinner, we took a walk. All of us. A herd, more than a line. The kids ran ahead. Then back. Then ahead again, orbiting us, like small moons. Greg pointed out a house with a new paint job and told me he'd repainted the nursery at their place himself, saving the money, and I told him, "The edges looked good when you taped them and took your time." He listened, and that was its own apology. Back home, I tucked the photo into the brass key box with the letter and the life estate, the way you group precious things so they can hum to each other in the dark. I slept with the window cracked again, and the crickets played their stringed instruments while the house breathed. No dreams, just sleep so clean. I woke up polished. Weeks slid into a shape that felt trustworthy. The nurse came and teased me about my blood pressure being better than hers. Daniel brought over a toolbox and left it by mistake, so he'd have an excuse to return, and I hid it in plain sight like a joke we both enjoyed. Melissa texted me photos of the kids at soccer, at a spelling bee, on a couch reading. Ordinary miracles in soft focus. Greg started a side job fixing fences, cash that was honest and sore in the hands, and every time he repaired a slat he couldn't help saying the word sturdy like it tasted good. Fall came. Leaves did their annual strip tease, and the yard filled with color the way some people fill notebooks. I raked a little and supervised a lot and let the piles stay messy, an offering to the wind. Mr. Alvarez brought tamales, again because there is no such thing as enough tamales. We stood on the porch and ate with our fingers and didn't talk about sold signs. We didn't have to. On a Tuesday, I was at the sink when the mail dropped. Habit still clenched a little in my stomach. The old flinch of the missing envelopes, but the new mailbox key had tamed that. I checked a postcard from a former student, a catalog begging me to buy flannel sheets, a letter from the county stamped P8 in a font so authoritative it made me sit up taller. I put it on the fridge under a magnet shaped like a chicken. I like a visual chorus of things that say handled. Later that week, I hosted book club. The ladies came with wine and opinions, and we loved a novel we had expected to hate. As they left, one of them lingered. She's my age with a laugh that knows how to climb stairs. I heard about the sign, she said, not making it gossip, just acknowledging a cloud that had already passed. Good for you. Thank you, I said. I prefer my lawn accessorized by leaves. She nodded at the railing. New? New, I said. I hold it when I semp, feeling sensible. She grinned. Isn't stet? That most of the time? Less than you'd think, I said, and we both laughed. There's a little spot on the wall by the stairs where hands have touched for decades, skin polishing paint into silk. I used to think I should scrub it away, repaint, make it neat. Now I run my fingers along it every time I pass, the way people pat a saint in a cathedral. It's a record of us. It's proof that we keep going. Up, down, up again. Wearing a path on purpose. One morning, the kids came over with backpacks and declarations. We said they're doing a heritage project. My granddaughter announced, eyes bright as coins. We have to bring something that shows where our family is from. She paused dramatically. Can we bring your house? You cannot wheel my house into third grade, I said. But you can take pictures, and you can take this. I went to the brass key box and took out the letter, not to hand over but to read from. I showed them the part where their grandfather called me Rosie, and their mouths rounded at the idea that their grandma had once had a different name inside one person's voice. I told them how a promise can be a stronger lock than any the locksmith installs. I told them that we come from stubborn people who learn to turn stubborn into steady. They drew it. Not the letter, not the legal terms, but the feeling, a brown house with windows that looked like friendly eyes, a porch with a railing, a woman with gray hair and strong legs, a garden with a tomato plant that somehow sprouted cupcakes. That's not accurate, I said, pointing at the cupcakes. It is if you bake, my grandson said, matter of fact, and he wasn't wrong. They took photos of the spot on the stairs, the dent in the couch, the pencil marks on the kitchen door frame where we measured heights over the years and forgot to stop. Melissa labeled each picture like a museum plaque. Greg stood in the doorway, watching, gratitude and relief, and a small, very human pride written all over him. He caught my eye and mouthed thank you. I nodded because we are past the point of making each other grovel. We have houses to live in. That night, after the kids had gone home with their heritage and their snacks, I sat on the porch and thought about the sentence that started this storm. You're too old to live here anymore. It still stung, but it had been sanded down by use, by apologies, by the work of changing. Sometimes sentences stay sharp forever. Sometimes they turn into handles you can hold. I thought about what I would tell a woman like me if she asked for advice, the kind you slip into a pocket and forget until you need it. I would tell her, get the locks changed. Yes, but also change the locks on your fear. Put your name on paper that matters. Keep a box for the important things and a brass key where you can reach it in the dark. Teach your children the difference between help and control, between surprise and ambush, between being safe and being contained. And when someone tries to plant a sign in your lawn that doesn't belong, open the door and make them pull it up themselves. Later, in bed, I listened to the clock sound like footsteps moving toward me and then away, then toward again, that steady beat. I breathed with it. I didn't say it out loud, because no one needed to hear but me, but I thought it, clear as if it had been printed on a crisp white page. I am not done living here. I am not done living. The next morning, there was no suitcase in the hallway. There was a bouquet, a simple one, daisies and sunflowers, a note tucked into the stems. In Melissa's handwriting, no more surprises. Love you. I put them on the table in the good vase and didn't bother to move the mail to make room. Let the ordinary and the apology sit shoulder to shoulder. When Daniel stopped by, he leaned on the railing he'd installed and gave it a little shake like a mechanic admiring his own work. Solid, he said. Like me, I said. He smirked. Like you, Mom. I walked him to the door. We stood there a second, taking in the nothing happening on the lawn, the beautiful absence of nonsense. Want to take the long way to the car? I asked. He frowned, then laughed when he understood. I meant let's walk the perimeter like sentries, not because we feared an attack, but because sometimes you honor peace by circling it. We did, slow and companionable, and when we got to the mailbox, I opened it with my new key just to hear the click. It sounded like a promise kept. That evening, as the sun thinned and the streetlights got brave, I made a small ceremony of nothing. I sliced an apple and sprinkled cinnamon and ate it standing up in the kitchen, the way you do when no one's watching, and the clock is merciful. I hummingbirded through drawers, tidied, straightened a picture frame by a 1/4 inch. I touched the spot on the stair wall and felt how smooth it had gotten under our hands, and then I went to the brass key box once more. I didn't open it. I only pressed my palm to the lid and said, thank you. To the man who'd put his words beside my stubborn, to the girl with the gap-toothed grin who came home again as a woman, to the son who installed rails without installing rules, to my own ribs for building a cage that could keep the right things in and the wrong things out. I turned out the light. The house made its little noises, the ones I know by name, a soft pop, a sigh, the sound of a place being exactly what it says it is. And I went to sleep in a bed I paid for, in a room I chose, in a life I refused to have boxed up and driven away, even with a sold sign ready to lie about it. In the morning, the steam from my tea curled like a ribbon, and I allowed myself one last flashback to the birthday dinner where this all began, the clink of the spoon against the glass, the sentence that tried to evict me from myself. Then I let it go, not because it wasn't important, but because it had done its work. I had done mine. Outside, on the lawn I paid for, the dew sparkled, the mail came on time, and I stood in a sunbeam in my kitchen, and felt 70 the way I like to feel it, not as a cliff, but as a veranda, wide enough to hold everyone I love when they remember how to knock.